Chapter 2. That Geography Lesson. The width of the room was 5 meters and the length was 9 meters. My task was to draw the room to scale. My teacher, Mr. Grant, a tall man with a triangular goatee, mesmerized me with his sheer intellect as he made the calculations look like a walk in the park. It all came so easily to him, it seemed. You might argue that as a teacher it was his job to make it look simple and natural. You might say that I had nothing to be amazed about. But if you could see him in person, he was a machine, a living, breathing computation device. Watching him work everything out, I could not help but be impressed. "What is a map?" he asked the class, standing like an eagle over his baby eaglets. With his height, he towered over us and had a perfect overview of everyone in the class. "A map is the bird's eye view of a piece of land drawn to scale on a piece of paper." The answer rolled off my tongue. "Fantastic answer, Brittany," Mr. Grant replied before changing the page of the PowerPoint to expose my answer. "There is another answer, sir," Chantel shouted. I could never stand that girl. She was taller than me, about 5'2", and man, she could boast. "She better not give a better answer than me," I muttered to myself. "A map is the representation of a piece of land drawn to scale on a piece of paper," Chantel uttered with total confidence, as if she had just worked out the theory of relativity for the first time in history. "Oh, please," I muttered again under my breath. "Talk about repetition." "But you get credit for rephrasing Brittany's answer with slightly more difficult words." My grin vanished. I was devastated. Mr. Grant had betrayed me. He might as well have told me that my answer was rubbish. Still, I smiled and accepted defeat. But I was not about to let this girl spoil my day. Not a chance. I had already proven that I was a naturally bright girl, but Chantel was determined to prove otherwise. She wanted to take the crown, and I was not prepared to give it up. I was a shy and introverted child, but I was slowly coming out of my shell. Something told me this school year might be the thing to kick me right back into my shell. I wanted to be that sassy girl who everyone loved, but I was beginning to feel that confidence and intelligence can be seen as a threat. I was soon to learn how big a threat it could be. "What is scale?" Mr. Grant asked as he continued on the topic of map work. My right hand shot up first. I was surprised that the armpit seam of my blouse did not burst, or worse, my arm did not break. "Scale is the relationship between the size of the map to the corresponding distance on the actual ground," I answered, beaming with pride. Mr. Grant could not have gotten a more confident answer than that. He was pleased. He admitted that was on a very high level. He was glowing at me. Boy, did that feel good. Even better, from the periphery of my eyes, I glanced Chantel, sulking. If looks could kill, then I certainly would have been struck dead that day by those beady little laser beams she had for eyes. I didn't care. I had given an answer every bit as good as the one she gave before. And it was an answer she couldn't top. That should shut her up for good, I thought. "However," Mr. Grant said. All of a sudden, time stood still. However? No, not however. Maybe he didn't like my answer. "However," he continued, "do you understand what you have just said?" He was getting annoying. What was he trying to do? If I did not know any better, I would think that he was in an alliance with Chantel to embarrass and destroy me. "Calm down, Brittany," I said to myself. "You are getting seriously paranoid." But I couldn't shake the conspiracy theory cooking in my head that Mr. Grant and Chantel were working together to humiliate me. There are some sick minds out there, you know? And who is to tell if Mr. Grant is not one of them? I thought. "Brittany, What do you understand from your answer?" "This terrible teacher is clearly trying to show me up," I muttered to myself. "Come to the front and use this Ordnance Survey map to explain your answer," he said as he further rubbed salt into my wide-open wound. I could still see Chantel's smug expression in my peripheral vision, since she was sitting to the far right of my table. "It's okay, sir. No, thank you. I'm good," I said. "I can, sir," shouted Chantel. She was actually gloating. What nerves! It was only the first day of school, and she was becoming too much for me. But I was far more annoyed with Mr. Grant. I was losing my confidence, but that inner side of me wanted to fight on. "Sir," Chantel said, beaming up at him, "can you hold the end of the OS map?" He obliged by stretching his end to the other side of the classroom. "Okay, so here is the thing. This is a map of southeast London, and it is not possible to get that area as it is on the actual ground on this paper," she said, pretending she was actually a teacher. "The idea here is to make a huge area like this fit on this small paper, and we can do this by scaling it down using the smallest unit of measurement." I was jealous at how she explained it all with ease. "So," she continued, "my dear friend Brittany correctly says that a scale is the relationship between the size of the map to the corresponding distance on the actual ground. The smallest unit, in this case, 1 centimeter on the map, is related to 100,000 centimeters on the actual ground." Chantel squared her shoulders and poked out her chest, clearly proud of herself. By this time, to say I was seething would have been an understatement. I swear that if you looked closely, you would have seen the steam leaving my head through my thick black hair. I wanted to cry, but I knew that was what she wanted. No, I would get even with her. Who am I fooling? I thought. I will probably just shut down completely like I always do. I was starting to think that it was better to be an introvert. I just did not think that I could win against Chantel if I didn't push back. She was so assertive, so confident. If I showed my intelligence, then I would either be scorned at by the jealous ones or mocked, or worse. I could be attacked. So, what do? I wondered. It was a dilemma that I dreaded to think about. "Do you understand it now, Brittany?" Chantel asked, her voice dripping with sheer sarcasm. I saw blood and decided at that moment to fight back and get even. I sat silently boiling in anger. "Thank you very much, Chantel. You have truly shined like the brightest morning star." Mr. Grant showered her with praise. There were 14 of us in the classroom. It was a relatively small class. Bent Hill Academy was newly formed. During its first year, there were only 5 pupils in the school. Then the numbers kept rising. Now we had a Year 8 class and a Year 9 group. As a matter of fact, Chantel had only just joined Bent Hill Academy 2 weeks ago. "Okay, we are going to do some measurements of the football pitch," Mr. Grant announced to us. He went into the back where a small storeroom adjoined the classroom. Out he came with a handful of clipboards and 14 trundle wheels. Mr. Grant demonstrated to us how to use the trundle wheel, which frankly was a bit patronizing. Of course, he couldn't know who needed the extra assistance, so I welcomed his help. We were put into 2 groups. My group was made up of Nathaniel, Levi, Michelle, Lorraine, Daniel, Andrew, and myself. We gathered at a table to talk about our project. "So, what should we do first?" Michelle asked quietly. "We have to pick a group leader," Daniel answered. "I think it should be Brittany," Andrew said, smiling at me. "Me?" "That's a great idea, Brittany," said Daniel. "You are really smart, Brittany," Levi said. I must admit that Levi was an interesting and intelligent lad. He was handsome and shy, but that was what I liked about him. I would never have guessed that he would have thought I was smart. I felt like I had to win this one, especially being in this leadership role, so I didn't prove him wrong. Okay, I'll do it. There was always something very endearing about Levi. His gorgeous chocolate skin was like mahogany, and those dark pupils of his eyes pierced me like a dagger. His eyes got brighter whenever he talked. His voice was smooth and just starting to get deep. His bright, shiny teeth made his whole face glow whenever he smiled, and he smiled at me a lot. Nathaniel, Michelle, Lorraine, Andrew, and Daniel were smart, but none of them got very good grades. They didn't apply themselves. They spent too much time laughing and joking around in class. But I thought I could motivate them, and, with the right leadership, they could add some value to the group. After all, they seemed to like me. So I decided I would be the best leader they could ever imagine. Just then, Chantel sauntered past our table. "Hi, guys. What are you up to? Still trying to decide how to get started? Having trouble?" she said smugly. "We're just fine, Chantel," I said. "Why don't you go back to your table?" "We're all done making a plan. I'm the leader of my group, so I told them what we needed to do. Of course, everyone loved my ideas. Discussion over." "Good for you, Chantel," I said sarcastically. "Would you excuse us now?" We were up against Chantel, and, although I was not scared of her, I was mindful of what she was capable of. She loved to brag and would certainly take every opportunity to undermine. I had to be careful, and I had to be good at leading my team. "Okay, lads and lasses, if you've chosen your team leaders, we'll get started," shouted Mr. Grant. It was funny hearing him speak sometimes, especially with the lisp, but I liked him. I wasn't a fan of how he fawned over Chantel. But now that my group had placed such confidence in me, I decided to forgive him and focus my energies on the task at hand, beating Chantel. We were all given the success criteria. Mr. Grant told us to make sure that the plan of the football field was calculated to an accurate scale and beautifully presented. The title was to be in black, bold, and uniformly spaced from one end to the other. The drawing had to be done with the use of a ruler, and where drawings were done, they had to be done to scale, and of course the scale was to be shown preferably as a ratio. I squared my shoulders, ready for the challenge, and the encouragement of my team gave me all of the incentive I needed to lead us to victory. Beating Chantel was the icing on the cake. My team was ready to work. Bring it on, I thought. I wouldn't settle for mediocrity.